Hello again. You're watching today on eNCA, GSTV channel 43 with me, Del Moyane, and I'm joined by our business editor here, Devin Murugan, because, you know, the budget was yesterday. Now we are looking further into the tax situation. Now, neither corporate nor personal income tax have been raised since 2020. In the budget yesterday, we also found out that the taxman has collected a projected 93 billion rand more than expected in February last year.
Yeah, that's right. So we want to dig into that. SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter joins us from our Cape Town studios. Commissioner, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. I mean, I suppose when you see a figure like that, 93 billion rand more than projected in February last year, we've had commentary saying, look, the mining companies have done well. They've, you know, made the profits and contributed to the coffers. But presumably you will tell me that the approach to fixing the agency and making sure that tax dodgers pay their dues is also a very significant part of the surplus that you've got.
Yes, good afternoon, Dan and Devin. I think that's a very important observation that you make there. Of course, there is a linkage between what happens in the economy and ultimately what happens in the tax stake. But there is not a straight line correlation. SARS does not sit and wait for monies to flow in. It has to engage actively with taxpayers to ensure that the money that is due is in fact ultimately ends up in the chest or in the coffers of government. And so I'm often asked, what is it that we do? And my response is, it isn't one big thing that we do. It is about getting many little things, getting it right, doing it consistently, with resilient effort and focus by 12,000 people. I can share some examples with you by way of just illustrating what I mean. So taxpayers who owe outstanding debt to SARS, and we know that the debt book is a huge contingent liability asset on the book of government, but it has to be collected. And so in the year that we are reporting on to date, we have been able to resolve almost 1.4 million cases where taxpayers owe debt. What does that mean? We've had to appoint, for example, we send out SMSs, we make follow-up calls, we send out letters. We've had to appoint over 540,000 letters of demand. We have to send out civil judgments, follow that up with other action. And that effort collectively, together with following up outstanding returns, in the number that the minister reported, will amount to 61 billion rand that would not have been in the coffers had SARS not done that work. Let me take another example. You have referred to the rebuilding of SARS. A huge focus of that rebuilding is, in fact, expanding and increasing the use of data and using artificial intelligence. We have to date received just over 14 million income tax returns from individuals, from companies, from VAT. It is humanly impossible for SARS to manually assess each of these. And so by using data and technology and building risk rules and machine learning algorithms, we're able to process all of those seamlessly. And of the 14 million or so, 1.7 million of those were highlighted that contains risk for us. And then by applying the rules, we were able to detect over 61 billion of impermissible or fraudulent refunds. That's 61 billion that would not have been in the number that the minister announced. And I can share many other examples. We're involved in criminal investigations. We've had a huge success. We've handed over 187 cases to the NPA this year. 94 of those cases have been concluded. And I'm very pleased to say that of that, 92 of those cases were successfully convicted. That's a conviction rate of almost 98%. In terms of our syndicated criminal, we have a division that looks after syndicated crime, including issues such as the Zondo Commission, the procurement irregularities that are often perpetrated. There, we have ensured through a focused effort to recover about 4 billion, and we have over 200 cases that we have concluded, with another 400 odd cases that are still in progress.
Yeah,
And
Commissioner,
so
if I may come in there, Commissioner Stan here, you're obviously winning big and small. As you say, the numbers are speaking for themselves, but you need resources, of course, to carry on, to deal with these cases. Are your resources in dealing with these cases improving?
So we have, since we were allowed the additional allocation by Treasury 2 years ago, we've been able to steadily improve the attraction of technical resources such as forensic investigators, auditors, data scientists, and other technology specialists. So just in the past year, we have been able to employ around about 590 people from outside of SARS, and have also been able to improve the career opportunities for people within SARS. So well over 800 people have moved into new roles, and slowly but surely we are bolstering the human capability. Important, as I mentioned earlier on, is empowering and enabling the work that people do with artificial intelligence, insights from data. And so increasingly the business model that SARS finds itself building is the synthesis of data, technology, and people. And increasingly, what we are doing is automating routine and manual work and adding data-driven insights to the work that our auditors and technical specialists do.
And
so we have a long way to go.
And they will be chasing,
we have a long way to go.
Commissioner, they will be chasing both the big and the small. And I mean, you've mentioned the small, but it's interesting that the big is also important, because let's take a look at that 900 million rand case that you won against Coronation. I mean, this is a big firm that revolved around the whole issue of a business establishment that was foreign, right? How significant is that case? Because that's a huge figure from Coronation.
It's very significant. And it covers an area of abuse that we often see corporates find themselves involved in. So corporates can create huge tax departments. They can attract significant and expensive advice, and they come up with elaborate structures and schemes, and with the sole purpose at times to minimize their tax obligation. Now, whilst you can organize yourself efficiently for tax purposes, you cannot break the law. A lot of the actions that companies do will include transfer pricing. Now, transfer pricing is when a parent company has a local subsidiary and they have an abnormal or commercially irrelevant loan agreement, for example. And the sole purpose of that agreement is to siphon profits onshore to the offshore mother company. There are several ways of companies buying shares in order to use cash that is supposed to be declared as profit and to mask it in share buyback schemes. So increasingly, the large business and international division that we have re-established about 3 years ago, making small inroads just in terms of the work that they do. In terms of base erosion and profit shifting, we have recovered about 3 billion rand, and in total, the work that this division have done just in managing a tight compliance program have also produced over 13 billion rand. We've also established, you will know, a division to look at high wealth individuals. And here again, I have to say, wealthy people often have the means to structure their affairs so that it masks their true wealth. What you have to do for wealthy people is not only look at their income statement, but look at their balance sheet. And so we are requiring taxpayers now to disclose not only their income, but also their assets and liabilities. A very useful insight that we obtain from exchange of information through our partnership with about 100 jurisdictions. We have visibility of South African individuals who have offshore assets or bank accounts in foreign jurisdictions. There's the famous Pandora Papers and Panama Papers, I can tell you now that we have obtained visibility by working with our foreign partners. We now have the names of over 400 South Africans, their names and their addresses that are mentioned as persons of interest in this regard. And so this will require us to follow up, to engage with them, and to the extent that one has an offshore asset isn't necessarily of itself a crime, but we will check for whether it was within the framework that is permitted by the foreign exchange regulations of South Africa, and whether those assets have been declared properly for tax purposes.
Yeah, now, Commissioner, it's then here. Tax collection, your effort there is affected by a number of factors, but one of the biggest ones is our economy, how our economy is performing. Now, National Treasury, as we heard yesterday from the Finance Minister, Godongwana, they are forecasting growth of 0.9% this year, and the Reserve Bank has got a lower number of 0.3%. What does this mean for you as SARS? Is that less tax collection going forward?
You know, Dan, I often say in South Africa the bad news is the good news. So what do I mean by that? Unfortunately, over many years, and particularly during those years of state capture, we have seen a steady decline of tax morality, compliance levels slipping, and a proliferation of criminal syndicates who literally steal from the coffers of state and deny the poor the services that they should be getting. And so what we have, and that's the bad news. The good news is that we still have many opportunities to improve the collection activities, and we have spoken about the examples, and just by being efficient in the administration of SARS, we are able, if you think about it, last year, SARS over-collected by almost 200 billion rand. This year, we are projecting an over-collection of 93, another 100 billion rand. And so just over the last 2 years, we, through the collection efforts, have added a further 300 billion into the coffers of state. That's 300 billion that the Minister of Finance does not have to go and borrow. It's 300 billion against which we don't have to service more debt, and therefore that's available to attend to the huge demands that is on the burden, expenditure burden of government. And so I think what we are experiencing is the positive impact, even in a bad economy, that a well-kitted out, a well-skilled and a well-organized revenue administration can have for South Africa. And that's why we should preserve jealously this institution. It belongs to South Africa, and South Africans should guard that we never ever allow the elements of state capture and corruption and collusion with taxpayers to defile the institution to the extent that we found it 5-6 years ago.
Commissioner, I want to ask you, and I get that point, I want to ask you something that was leveled against SARS, criticism from a tax consulting firm, right? And it's got to do with some of those taxpayers that are seizing their tax residency because they're immigrating. Now, one consulting firm said last week that, look, you guys at SARS are making it a bit difficult. I mean, in their words, rejecting some of these applications for inconsistent reasons. To what extent is that happening? Is it difficult for people to seize their tax residency, and are you giving these reasons that are inconsistent? Is that happening?
Devin, I am not going to declare here that we don't sometimes get things wrong, or that an auditor may misinterpret the requirement. But I can give you this commitment without any fear of contradiction, that we aim to apply the law without fear, without favor. We do so in as professional a way that we can do. And so what I invite taxpayers and practitioners to do is to raise any instance where they think we have been heavy-handed or we have treated them unfairly. I can say to you that the majority of taxpayers who would apply for a directive, we would respond, we will engage, and provided they answer and respond to the requirements that we have to apply our minds to, there should be no delay. There should be no undue difficulty. Why would we make it difficult for people? We don't pass judgment when people decide to emigrate. We simply apply the laws. And we have three objectives in everything we do. The first is to clarify the objectives that people have. The second is to make it easy for taxpayers to fulfill those obligations. And the third one is to ensure that no one defrauds or breaks the laws. And in those instances, we will unapologetically make it hard and costly.
Yeah. Just a final question. I need to ask you this, Commissioner, because post the budget, we got some reaction from ordinary citizens who are saying they were hoping for a better rebate, tax rebate for the solar panels. Households getting a rebate, and it's only valid for 1 year and up to a maximum of 15,000 rand. What informed that?
Well, Treasury is really responsible for tax policy. SARS is responsible for administering tax policy. So you really should direct the question of what informed it to our colleagues in Treasury. But let me add to that, no incentive is a perfect measure. Incentives are meant to direct a particular behavior. In this case, to encourage individuals and companies to make an investment that they would probably have made in any event into making themselves a little bit more energy self-sufficient and to take pressure off the grid. So, of course, no incentive is ever enough. How much is enough? I think what Treasury, through the policy, recognizes is that South Africans are generally tight for cash. They generally need every help that they can get. And so the rebate or the relief that has been provided are the inflation adjustments to the tax brackets, as well as the little bit of help when and should individuals decide to invest in solar and to make themselves a little more energy self-sufficient. So I guess there'll always be those who are delighted and all those who wish they received more.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Well, SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter, thanks very much indeed for talking to us there from our Cape Town studios.
Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Thank you very much, Devin Morgan, for being together on this one. We appreciate it. You're watching today on eNCA GSTV Channel 403.